Hello, Ståle Hansen here. I'm here to talk about how to troubleshoot Teams users using PowerShell. On Twitter, I boasted that I migrated 40,000 users and I stayed sane by using this one-liner. What am I talking about? I'm talking about get CS online user. It's Sky for Business PowerShell now enrolled into the Teams PowerShell module. And I have a blog post on this on msunify.net, so you can check out the one-liner for yourself. But let's dive into the demo because I want to show you the power of this one-liner. So let's switch to PowerShell here. Here is the link to the toolbox, as I call it, my post Sky for Business toolbox migration kit. And here I'm going to sign into the Teams module. So I'm not going to download or use the Sky for Business module. I'm using the Teams module. And I'm importing it. And it's important for you that it is 1.1.6 or newer. So I'm going to, if you need to install it though, you need to, and you already have it, you need to use install module Microsoft Teams Force. So here I'm going to connect to Microsoft Teams and I'm going to specify the username because the beauty of that is that then I will save the token and I can reuse the token. So by specifying the username, then you don't have to retype the password every time. This is modern authentication. You see I get the authentication prompt here. And of course there's multi-factor authentication. And we're in. From here on, I'm going to do the old way of connecting to Sky for Business, but without the Sky for Business online PowerShell module. So I'm going to create a new online session and then I'm going to import it. Now this is done, I'm going to do one more thing. Because it turns out, at least at release, it did not include this beautiful command here. Enable CS online session for reconnection. This is beautiful stuff because it will automatically reconnect itself. But fear not, because the community got your back. Andres Gorzelani, he created a PowerShell script that we can use to stay connected. So go visit his blog, it's beautiful. So I'm going to run this and see I've installed it under ctemp and I'm going to run it as a PowerShell script. Now we have saved the token and we will automatically reconnect. So let's dive into this. What am I talking about here? Well, this is the one-liner. This is the beauty. Get CS online user for a specific user, and then I select a couple of attributes. So let's have a look at those. This command, when you are running it for a lot of users, it actually takes some time. So let's see what we got here. Okay, we have the user principal name, the display name, zip address. We see that the user is enabled. We see that the user is Teams only mode. We see it's enterprise voice enabled. We see the city. We see the usage location, dial plan. We see the phone number here. We see that online dialing conferencing policy, service allowed, which means that we have audio conferencing license assigned. We have a cloud video interrupt policy assigned here. We have a Teams calling policy assigned. And here we have attributes that let us know that we are migrated, that we are configured correct. Hosting provider is zipfed, which means that we have the correct attributes here. And this one, people, this one is important. It tells us so much. And it tells us even more and more and more. So Microsoft is developing this further. It is the interpreted user type, where you can look at what kind of user this is. Is it a pure online user? Is it a hybrid user? Does it have Teams license? Does it need provisioning? All that you will see here. Also, it's interesting to see the online voice policy for direct routing. If it were, this is direct routing. If it were a calling plan, then you will see business voice instead. And then Norway here is country and region. We see the dial plan is Norwegian. We see the usage location is Norwegian. And it even matches our city, which tells us I am Norwegian. Yes, that's correct. I am from Norway. I live in Oslo. And it also tells us that this user will get the correct normalization of phone numbers, because that's the dial plan here. And also we see that the user will get the correct phone number in the Teams meeting invitation for the audio conferencing license. So this tells us so much at a glance. So after you have migrated the user, you can verify the user just by glancing at this. I have solved so many issues by doing this, and I'm using it systematically in my migrations. So let's continue here and look into different users. So I'm going to import a couple of users here, and this is the way I will validate users. So I import them into an attribute, I count how many they are, and then I can loop through this and get all the attributes for those users. So here's a for each loop. So now I have two users that I got the information from. I got it from my colleague Morten Hellebro, and I got it for myself. So this is a really simple loop you can do in order to verify that either the users have the correct location, they have not been migrated if you're going to migrate them, or they have been migrated if that is the case. And then I'm using this also to validate post-migration. So this is the way I've done it. So I have a migrated user output, which is a attribute which I put everything in an array. And then I know the number of users, and I want to see how many users have I actually looped through, because this takes some time. Also, for each user, we loop through this. Also put in a sleep here for 400 milliseconds, because what we want to avoid seeing here is that we are dropping users, because the moment we are reconnecting, if the loop is too fast, it will actually miss a couple of users. So we want to avoid that. That is why I added the sleep here. And for each 100 users, I will post like, hey, I have checked 100 users now. We have 5,000 users left, for instance. So let's take a look at that. Checking. Boom, finished. When it's 2 users, doesn't take a lot of time. And then I export this into a CSV. And then I can open it in Excel. And then I can sort on how many users got migrated, how many failed, and so on and so forth. So it's a really great command. Let's look at this and how it looks in larger environments. First off, I'm using the sleep because I want to avoid seeing this. That remote server failed with the following error message, IO operation. And the reason for this is it needs to like reconnect. And that's where the reconnect was important, but still that takes some time. So we need to have that timeout so we're not skipping a lot of users. So 5 to 10 users we may be skipping here. And here you see that, okay, I have 2,300 users I'm checking. I'm at 1910 now and moving forward. This is great stuff. All right. Moving forward, UPN. It's a great way to validate that. And we are checking that UPN matches the name, matches the zip address. It's not that important anymore that the zip address matches the UPN because of modern authentication. As you saw when I logged on to the PowerShell, I got the web page for logon. It's not a basic authentication. I'm not using my SIP address. I'm using my VPN to log on to Teams, to Skype for Business, to Exchange through Outlook Mobile, for instance. So just make sure that it makes sense, the VPN here. Validate that the user is enabled. So we see that the user is enabled to true. We see that Teams upgrade effective mode is Teams only. We see that enterprise voice is enabled. And we see that online dialing conferencing policy is allowed. This is really useful information. So yeah, I know that this user should be enabled now and good to go. Next, I want to validate is license. And yes, this is not get CS online user. I will do that through Azure Active Directory. So I will throw that in here for you for free that you can review. So this is the Azure AD preview module. I will import it. And as you see here, I'm specifying the username, which means that when I connect to Azure AD, I don't need to add the password. How beautiful is this? It brings tears to my eyes. So what you will see though is all the kind of licenses we have in the tenant. And they have a SKU part number and a SKU ID. Fear not though, because the SKU ID is the same every time in all tenants. You can actually create your own database here with what kind of licenses you have and usually see, and what you will see here for the GUID and the SKU ID that you're looking for. So here you will see the GUID. You can copy that and understand what kind of licenses there are. So looking into that, users, group roles, licensing, service plan reference is what you're looking for here. All right, I'm looking for these licenses within my environment because we have E5, we have E3, we have E5 with calling plans, so on and so forth. So check assign licenses for a single user just gives us the SKU ID for some reason. Also, you get an X here if the license is assigned but disabled. So we need to look for those GUIDs. So here is something I do when looking for this and checking if the user is present in Active Directory and the user is licensed. So I load in the different GUIDs. Then I will check if the user is in Azure Active Directory. Then I will check if it is in Active Directory. Does it have the correct licenses? Those 3 licenses I need to see that the users are correct. So running this for my selection, I will export unlicensed users and no AD users into CSV files. This is a bad example though, because all the users I checked had the correct licenses, they were present and all that. So using this loop though, I use the user list here to find the user. If this one is empty, that tells me that it is not existing in Active Directory. And then I reset it if it actually did exist for each round. That is the way I work with this. Let's have a look at how it looks when we have a larger environment. So here I see people are not licensed. And when you see this error, I probably could have built in so I don't see the error, but I don't mind. And here we see that, okay, this user does not exist in Azure Active Directory, which means that when we are saying why this user didn't migrate, we're saying, hey, the list we got was wrong. This user didn't exist anymore, so this is why it didn't get migrated. And this is a fact. When you're migrating thousands of users and 40,000 users, you do get a list that's not entirely complete. Let's be honest about that. All right, moving on. Validate calling and location. Let's look at this. Oh, here you see I'm rejoining the session. I don't have to do anything. Boom, I'm back in again. This is beautiful. This works so much better now when it's part of the Teams commandlet, because you don't need to re-authenticate. It's so I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm getting warm inside here. Okay, moving on. User principal name here is good. We are looking for online voice routing policy. We are looking for Teams calling policy. We see that the number here matches. We see the voice policy. And we see the Norway here again. I'm Norwegian. I have a Norwegian number. I see the online voice routing policy, which is great for direct routing, that I know where I'm routing my calls, unrestricted. So typically one location deployment here, and it breaks out in Norway. I'm really happy with this user. Let's take a look at my colleague Morten though, because he are using calling plans in Sweden. Yes, they got released in Sweden November 1st. I'm sorry, October 1st was when they got released. And Business Voice is calling plans. We see he has a Swedish number. We see that he has a usage location, Sweden. We see dial plan in Sweden. We see the country and region in Sweden. We do see here though, and this is a live environment, that he has non-matching line URI and on-prem line URI, which is kind of odd. But this user has been moving back and forth between direct routing and calling plans, and something has gotten lost in translation here. It's not a synced user, so it's not a synced attribute. But let's look into the numbers later. I'm going to look at how to normalize these users, because the dial plan here defines how the normalization will work. And if you're doing a global deployment, Ken Lasko has you covered with normalizing numbers and helping you route numbers the correct way by normalizing them to the correct gateway. Use dial plans, people, and buy him a coffee if you're using this tool, because it saves you so much time. I had a customer, I deployed this in 10 minutes. They said, how did you do that? Because the previous deployment we had in Sky for Business a couple of years ago, he spent months tuning those dial plans. I said, yeah, that's how good I am. And this is how good you can be by using UC dial plans. So here it is. You can sign in and you can get it to create the dial plans you need. Use it. All right. Creating batch for assigning online voice routing policy. Microsoft has heard you, and granting individual policies just doesn't work. They agree. I agree. That's why we now have new CS batch policy assignment operation, where you can assign all kinds of policy, calling policy, the video interrupt policy, and so on and so forth. So here I'm going to do that. I'm going to assign a policy to myself, and I'm going to see here that we're assigning this to myself and Morten. So now I'm creating actually it doesn't happen instantly. It may take up to 3 to 24 hours for this to actually get processed. But you get the status of this, and you can see how far along it has come. You see here we have a completed one. It's already in progress actually. This is really quick, and Microsoft is working on speeding up this, especially when we get a more normalized situation for how we live today, COVID and stuff. Moving on then, validate location, look at usage location, and this is interesting stuff. So let's look at this in Azure Active Directory, because it's an Azure Active Directory attribute. Usage location is Norwegian here, you see. What we see in larger deployments is that this location is not used for anything, so they don't configure it. So if you have a global deployment, this could be Norway for all of the users, or UK for all of the users, even though they are in the US, even though they are somewhere in Europe or Australia or whatever. So the usage location is something you should care about for 2 reasons. Number 1, it is defining the dial plan, the normalization you get of numbers. Number 2, it defines the number in Teams meetings. So if you roll out audio conferencing, then you will see that they get not the local number, but the Norwegian number or the UK number and so on. So we need to make sure it's correct. You may also be syncing this on premises. You can use the C attribute in Active Directory, which is the same short name for country here, or you can sync it with an exchange attribute, which is an exchange usage location attribute. It's not done by default, but it's optional. You can do that. So it's definitely syncable. So here I'm going to set myself to US. Didn't work because I didn't get an object ID, but let's move on. And then we can validate it here by looking at the usage location, Norway. I've been talking about this a lot, but it's important that we see that dial plan, usage location, country, city, it makes sense. And then when we have changed, if we needed to do that, if I have been changed to US, for instance, then I would have needed to run the CSX Exchange Meeting Migration Service. And I'm going to do that for my buddy. What you will see here is that when you run this, and of course it requires you to be on Exchange Online to do this. When you do this, you can see that we have a pending migration here, and we have succeeded migrations. So this needs to be done every time you change the location so that the number gets repopulated. Let's have a look into hybrid identity. So when we run this command, we see that we get interpreted user type, we see hosting provider, and we see the name of the user. Hosting provider tells us where the user is located. Interpreted user type tells us what the state of the user is. If you don't know what this means, fear not. The community got you. And Andre Gorzelani, he has done it again. He's even created a GitHub repository where you can contribute to this because they actually recently changed, adding some more team-specific attributes. So check that out. So this will tell you how to troubleshoot it. Check out the blog posts. On-prem users. So what we're going to see here is that if you want to clear the hosting provider, then you can run set AD user clear msRTC zip deployment locator. And this is kind of important as well, because if this is wrong, you will see it says srv : which means the on-prem attribute is still there and the user is not migrated. Then we can see the correct deployment here is zipfed online link user. We see it's hybrid online SFB user with Teams license. And then here we see a pure on-prem user. So this is what we want to see. This is not correct. User is not licensed yet. This is the user still being on-prem, and we haven't even tried to migrate the user. So if you have a deployment where you have not removed the attributes correct on users, but you have removed Sky for Business, then you can clear this out, and it's in the blog post how to do this. But you can loop through all users, all that has SRV, and just clear out these attributes. This is a Azure Active Directory on-prem command. It's not Azure Active Directory, but Active Directory on-prem. Azure just rolls out of the tongue now, so that's happened. Okay, numbers before we round off here. So we want to look at numbers, and we can use set user on-prem lineary if the user does not have an on-premises populated lineary. This is for direct routing. If you want to do it in Azure in Active Directory, not in Azure Active Directory, you can either clear out the attribute because you want to work with it online. Then you just need to clear out msRTC zipline, or you can set it as well. You can set it using set AD user, replace msRTC zipline with tel:, you're not using the Sky for Business PowerShell command here. It's an Active Directory command. But we recommend that you do this online, that you work with the numbers for users online. Also, if you have calling plans, you use the line URI. So set CS user line URI is what you're using, and make sure the user is enabled for enterprise voice. But again, make sure that there is no residual attributes for Sky for Business in Active Directory for this. To sum up, here it is, the one-liner that gives us everything we need when we are onboarding a lot of users, migrating from Sky for Business, or changing a lot of users because you are cleaning up. Make sure you know what's going on before the support calls comes in, and that you easily can figure it out when you have a support call. What is going on with this user? This is what you can do to do it. This is how I stay sane migrating 40,000 users in such an environment. My name is Ståle Hansen. I'm a principal cloud architect at Cloudway. I write the book Office 365 for IT pros, and I write a chapter about meetings and calling. That's the chapter I write about, together with MVPs like Tony Redmond. I am telling you that if you're not using this book actively to understand Office 365, you are missing out. Thanks for watching.